Welcome to Duck Club Tuning and Finding the Sweet Spot. Grab a cup of coffee and like and subscribe. And welcome back to Duck Blow Tuning, Finding the Sweet Spot. Today is the follow-up video, number 2 in the series, for the Hisenior Mega5est Base Plus Limited Edition. This came to me through Gareth from Hisenior. Thank you very much. Shout out to him and Hisenior for sending this through. My opinions are my own. With that, let's get stuck into how this IEM performs. First off, I did an unboxing video. If you haven't seen that already, it's the previous video to this. Beautiful shells. I really like how this glistens. Red shell on the right, red is right, and then the black shell. Actually, the black shell glistens as well, but not as much. It almost looks like onyx. I said this in the previous video, but if you get it in the light, you'll actually see it sparkle. So the black shell does actually sparkle as well. The cable is excellent. I forget how many cores it is. It's in the details. We'll follow up on that. It comes with an impedance adapter, and I didn't use it. And the reason I didn't use it is you can bring down the energy across the entire frequency spectrum, and it will lower the treble and the mids more than it does the bass. What that does, of course, is gives you more bass. I like to use PEQ. That's what this channel is all about. So rather than using an impedance adapter on this, I EQ'd it, and we're going to get into what that EQ does to the sound signature on the Mega5est Base Plus. It also has 12 sets of tips that came with it. I said that in the previous video. That's an enormous amount of choice to make sure it fits your ears. I settled on the Venus velvet tips. I use these for everything because they actually work best for me. I'm not saying they would work best for you, but I know they're quite popular, and I use the Venus velvets on just about everything that I do. Let's talk about what's inside the IEM. Good quality drivers. So this is a tribrid set. You can see it's a 1DD, 2BA, 2EST set. The ESTs are Sonian, the BAs are Knowles, and it has a 4-way integrated crossover. And what that means is you're isolating the sound into 4 different regions. You have a bass region, you might have a lower mid, an upper mid, upper treble, and then a higher treble region. So you might have 4 different regions that the crossover is looking after with this 5-driver set. And this comes in at 24 ohms, which means it's not incredibly hard to drive, but it is going to eliminate, let's say, some noisy noise sources being at 24 ohms. And you should be able to drive this with a DAP fairly well that is pumping out, let's say, north of 500 milliwatts. It's really important that you have good quality drivers. I know HPB's been hammering on this, and it's really important that manufacturers do actually state what manufacturers' drivers are using, not just say custom. I absolutely agree with them on that. Next thing I wanted to talk about was the cable. There it is. The Manta cable is a 532 core, what they call up-dash OCC, so that's oxygen-free copper. That cable is excellent. It's premium. I talked about this in the unboxing again. It doesn't have any memory. It actually lays really, really well. I like what they've done with this cable. I will keep it on this IEM, whereas most IEMs I replace the cable when I keep them. This one, I'm keeping that cable on it. You can also get this with different faceplates. You'll notice here that there's some stunning designs that you're able to get, very similar to the Audio theme, where you can get different faceplates for the IEMs. I have the disco shells on the Monarch Mark IIIs. I think they're stunning. Same sort of thing you can get here. In keeping with the theme, I really like having, this is my only set that has 2 different colors, so the black and the red. So you're staying that way. I don't need custom shells for this, but if you do, if that's not your flavor, they do have choices. Now let's talk about the frequency response. This is on SquigLink. This is duckbloke.squig.link. These are my test results from using my 711 coupler just here. As soon as I see an IEM that has, let's say, a 2 dB lift over the treble, I know that it's going to be tuned somewhat to my liking. And I wasn't wrong with this set either. It also has a very good bass tuck in the way that this glides down and comes in with the bass at about 200 hertz. A lot of IEMs come in a lot later, have that V-shaped tune, and that tends to muddy the vocals, but this set, it controls the vocals very well. What we see here is a very good treble extension. Anytime I see a bunch of bumps laying out and not going very steeply down out to 15,000 hertz, the set is going to extend very well. This set did not disappoint. This is the OG in green, so the Mega5est 7th Anniversary Edition, lined up against the Mega5est Base Plus. And you can see they did exactly that. that they added about 4 dB bass to the original tuning in the sub-bass region and glided it down at about the same point to 200 hertz. It follows the PEQ gain almost identical, but where it did shift a little bit different is that, again, that treble extension. I thought it had much better treble extension than the OG as well. The OG is a little bit dark, and when I tuned it, I actually added quite a bit of treble to it. Didn't have to do that on this set as much. I've talked about the targets that I use in my tuning. So the way I do my tuning is I create up to 70 different targets and PEQ settings that I load into my DAP, and I switch between them, and I use a piece of paper to actually log through 30 songs, and I'm going to show you the paper here. I'm just going to grab it. So here you can see I take 30 songs. This is the Mega5 EST right here, Bass Plus, and I mark down with a pencil where I think it lands for each one of my settings. And you can start to see a pattern form here on where this lays on which PEQ setting is actually lining up the best. And it happened to be my number 19 setting, which is one of my favorite settings. Number 19 adds about 3 dB of bass boost and is slightly warm. It's my step A, or the first step in my warmth target. So it actually brings this down slightly warm, and you can see just how far this overlays one of my favorite targets. So right in the middle of where I want this to be tuned is where this measures out of the box, which makes it an excellent IEM to start with. This is where it landed. So like I was talking about, you can see here the up and down, up and down, up and down. So we're changing the dB level, as well as we're going from warm to neutral on the settings here as well. Found this landed, and where I think it started, by the way. So let's go where I started. So I always put a marker out there in red to show where I think this starts in its tuning out of the box before PEQ is applied to it. This one starts at about a bass 3, so it has plenty of bass out of the box, and it's about a warm 2. So you saw that tilt down where it was slightly warm. That's where I think this lands from my listening. When I add the PEQs, what sounds best across those 30 songs that I listened to fell between the bass 3 and bass 4, so I know I needed a little bit more bass added to it, and I also knew that I needed to add a little bit more sparkle or add a little bit in the treble region to fall between my neutral and my warm 1 setting. So this is going to fall right here between these 4 pillars where I wanted to get the tuning. This is where I ended up. So the green line is after the EQ was tuned using the FIO K19 and listening to it live on this DAC and using the DSP software to adjust my settings. So this is the fine tuning stage of what I do. You can see I've added about 1.5 dB to the sub bass lift that again extends out to about 200 hertz, but I actually brought this up slightly in this region right here, about 170, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. But and then the treble region, I followed this through in the PEQ gain, but the treble region, you can see I added a couple of dB as this extended out to add a little bit more sparkle, more soundstage, more detail into the sound, and make it less warm, to bring that, to lift it up. But you can see in the future slides that you actually have to rob Peter to pay Paul, because you can't just raise the treble without affecting other regions as well, like sibilants. So we're going to talk about that further on. This is the spider graph, and here's the scoring that I gave this out of the box versus what I came up with for the PEQs. The score was a 9.12 out of 10, putting this into the A tier class straight out of the box, and it elevated to a 9.51, anything above a 9.5, by the way, and I round as well, so I round to the first decimal. Anything that's a 9.5, I would consider an S tier. So this sneaks into S tier class after the PEQs are applied to it. We're gonna walk through what changed and what couldn't be changed, and what changed for the worse and was sacrificed so that other regions could be made better through the tuning. So the first thing I want you to notice is the texture. The texture stayed a 9, and we're going to show that on the next slide when we show the bar graphs, but it stayed a 9. Remember, we talked about that this is a tribrid with 5 drivers, and I really relate texture to the number of crossover points there are in the crossover, as well as the number of drivers that are present. If you think about texture, think about an orchestra versus a 3-piece band. You're going to get a lot more texture in the sound when you have a full orchestra and you have multiple instruments. The same is true for the number of drivers. So when you have IEMs that are, let's say, much more expensive, have higher drive counts, you're going to start to get a little bit more texture in that as well. I could not impact the texture with my tuning, but I did impact everything else. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about sibilance. One of the things that bugs me the most is when an IEM is sibilant, so that you hear on certain tracks are, let's say, accentuated. How well an IEM controls that is really a benchmark of how well the tuning is done by the tuner. And this set is one of the best tuned for sibilance I've ever heard. It got about a 9.8 out of the box, and I had to reduce its score in sibilance. I had to take away, again, robbing Peter to pay Paul, in the sibilance by about 0.2. I brought this down from a 9.8 to a 9.6 in sibilance. Let's talk about this so that I could increase the upper treble, the sound stage width, the detail, and the layering aspects of this IEM. As soon as I was able to extend the treble, and I did that very carefully and very strategically on multiple frequencies, I was able to get that to increase greatly by about 0.5 across multiple attributes by sacrificing just a little bit of sibilance. Performs as well as most really good IEMs after the PEQ setting is applied. Next thing we're going to talk about is how we added more bass. So we added about 1.5 dB of gain in the bass at 34 hertz in my tuning. And what that does is it not only increases the sub-bass space and bass feel, it gives you more note weight and slam. So all 5 of these attributes, by increasing that bass ever so slightly, and again, I listen to bass heavy tracks, I listen to other tracks where I don't want the bass to be present, and I really try to fine tune it so that I push the bass to its limit without being overbearing, so that it still lets all the vocals shine through and all the treble regions shine through as well. This only a 1.5 dB lift, and that affected 5 different attributes on my scale. Next, I increased at 170 hertz by about 0.7 dB in gain. And what this did, this IEM, if you look at the forums and listen to the feedback on this IEM, they say that it's a little bit thin. The vocals are a little bit thin. Okay, they were slightly recessed. And as soon as I added, and usually I'm taking away in this region, but they've done such a good job of tucking that region that maybe they've tweaked it just a little bit too far. And what I did was I added just a little bit of gain back at about 170 hertz, and all of a sudden the vocals were brought to that neutral position where they were being heard to their full extent in both the female and the male vocals. And the female vocals were really impacted at the higher regions by what I did on that treble extension, but the male vocals in particular here at 170 hertz, it really brought them forward. This is the bar graph, same thing as the spider graph, but it shows you, let's say, just the elevation, and this is measured from 7 to 10. So realize the scale is from 7 to 10. The blue is where we started, the orange is where we finished, and you can see that the masking and the sibilance are excellent on the Mega5 EST Bass Plus. Out of the box. Could not improve them. Sibilance, I sacrificed about 0.2 on the sibilance so that I could bring other regions up in the treble and the layering and the soundstage. Texture was about the same no matter what I did, and again, that's related to the driver count and to the number of crossover points. The overall score, though, was improved quite a bit by about 0.4 and brought this into the S tier region. So here's the ranking. See where this falls. Out of the box, before PEQ, it's 6th overall. Some people are going to yell at me, and I've already had people come back to me and say, how can you say that about the Origin, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I have an Origin. The Origin is very good, but I ranked it at number 9. I had the Mega5 EST original version, the OG, just above it, and then the EBC 80. Well, this actually is better than both the EBC 80 and the original Mega5 EST out of the box. It scored a 9.12 versus a 9.06 and a 9.03. So they're very close in their scores. I mean, there's not much in it. It actually scored just under the Monarch Mark III at $1,000, and this is $589. So is this good value? I think it's excellent value out of the box. Here's where it went after PEQ was applied. So it moved from being an A tier to being an S tier IEM. We went up to a 9.51. It is number 6 again, still on the list. It is still under the Monarch Mark III, but it is just above the Alpha Omega Ra. And I love the Ra. I rated it as my IEM of the year for 2024. I only wish that Hisenior had sent me this earlier, because this would have been rated as my probably as my IEM of choice in 2024. Probably a pretty close tie, because if you look at the scoring, this is a 9.51 and a 9.48. They are very similar. They're also very similar in their driver counts. This is a 4 crossover system with 5 drivers with ESTs. Neither of these has bone conduction. You know, I know bone conduction is all the rage right now, but neither of them have bone conduction, but they are tribrids with ESTs, BAs, and dynamic drivers. Both of them perform very similarly. Both of them are stunning to look at. So it's really, you know, do you want it made out of Malaysia? Do you want it made out of China? Which cable do you like? This cable doesn't come with it, by the way. There's a different cable that comes with it. It's in here. Which IEM do you like the looks of? They sound very similar. And again, they're 0.03 different from one another. So let's wrap this up. The Mega5 EST Base Plus, highly recommended. It's A tier out of the box. It's S tier after PEQ. It has stunning looks. There it is. Great cable. It has a great price. I think at $589, it's well worth it. After you add the PEQ, contact me. Please subscribe. If this is your first time seeing my videos, go back through the old ones. But please subscribe, like the video, growing the channel. I will be at CanJam New York coming up next month. If you're there, look for me. I'll have a t-shirt on that has Duck Bloke on it. So if you can spot me and say, hey, I watched your video. If you do, I might have something special in store for you as well while I'm there. I'm working on some giveaways. But with that being said, please like and subscribe. Duck Bloke out. Thank you for visiting Duck Bloke Tuning and finding the sweet spot. Your comments are very much appreciated. I'll try to respond as quickly as possible. Share the PEQ settings with you if you own these particular IEMs or if you plan on purchasing them to maximize your investment. Again, thank you so much for supporting the project.